Ladies and gentlemen, at the Global Islamic Finance Forum, we are pleased to have policymakers, industry leaders, Sharia scholars, academicians, and subject matter experts coming together to drive impactful discussions to the future of Islamic finance. Their collective insights and diverse perspective will not only shed light on emerging trends and challenges, but also inspire collaborative solutions that strengthen the Islamic finance ecosystem. It is through platforms like this that we have continued to bridge ideas, values, and innovation to shape a more inclusive and sustainable financial future. Ladies and gentlemen, our first session is proudly brought to you by Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. This session will explore strategies to boost intra-OIC investments by leveraging Islamic finance as a catalyst for stronger economic cooperation, aiming to ensure shared growth, prosperity, and sustainability within the OIC ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed panelists will share their thoughts and perspective on unlocking the power of intra-OIC investment, building bridges to enhancing economic cooperation. Please welcome our panelists for this session, Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin, UN Special Envoy for Financing Sustainable Development, who will speak to us virtually. Dr. Sami Al-Suwailem, Acting Director General, Islamic Development Bank, ISDB Institute, and Professor Emeritus, Dr. Muhammad Azmi Omar, President and CEO of INCEIF. To moderate this session, please welcome Mr. Kamarul Bahrin Haron, former Editor-in-Chief, Astro, Awani. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for Q&A, you may submit your related questions to the panelists via QR code on slido.com, which will be displayed on the screen later. Upon log on, please choose session 1 to project your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Kamarul, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, wonderful MCs. Very good morning. Assalamu alaikum to all brothers and sisters who came from far and near. My only challenge is that I cannot ask God for more time for this session because we do have really remarkable panel members for the first session today. And but I would like to start with, because heavy on my shoulder is the royal lecture, the opening address, and now the special address. And I would like to start with, His Excellency started with Gaza. So I would like to quote the special rapporteur before of the UN, Francesca Albanese, who says that the genocide is continuing because it is lucrative. And she further said during her presentation of the Economics of Genocide report to the UN that we have our hands on a lot of things when we buy and purchase things because these are also interrelated to the economics of genocide. So while we're going to talk about building bridges among the OIC countries, we are also existing in a very complex world. At COP21, Sir David Attenborough is not even a Muslim, but a very much sought after thought leader on planet and society of flora and fauna. If working apart we're a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together we are powerful enough to save it. So that for people, planet, and then now the profit part of it is what I want to start with this morning. But I have this one thing because not many people know that my first job was as a banker before I went into the media. So sitting with great people who looks at finance and investment, some figures just amaze me. We've heard about more than 5 trillion. We've heard about the sovereign wealth fund of the world. We put together all the OIC members. It's close to nearly 50%. Tan Sri Azman Mohd, the great Tan Sri Azman Mohd is in front here. And whenever I met him before in Davos, he will say, Kamarul, the GLCs are also there to build the nation, which is the people's side of the profit. But despite these remarkable numbers, there are so many ills, even in the OIC countries, that people, the Gen Zs of the world, are going to the streets and complaining about things. So I'm going to start first with maybe the furthest away from us, Dr. I can only see you at my back, Dr. Muhammad Mohd, because you are specifically looking at saving the planet from burning by looking at how do we finance this. Because climate action, as we hear, that's going to start, the next COP will be in Belém, in Brazil. And the president of Brazil even moved the venue to the city that is very much in the rainforest. And we need about 1.3 trillion financing to ensure all the targets that we have. So Dr. Muhammad Mohd, I know it's very early in the morning. I think you are in London or UK. So can you please start on, for you, what is the best way to figure out saving people and planet through increasing trade and investment, taking into it the Islamic principles, like what Ibn Khaldun said, like what was reiterated by His Royal Highness the Sultan of Perak last night, that it must be core at the beginning, people. It must look at people before profit. Over to you, Dr. Muhammad.
Right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And greetings from Washington, D.C. It's almost 10 p.m. Here, and I just landed from the Gulf. So it's not an issue of jet lag, perhaps jet confusion. Anyways, after hearing the excellent remarks, the introductory remarks by Dato Muhammad Muazzam and the very comprehensive keynote speech by Mr. Najmuddin Bilal Erdogan, whom had the honor of meeting him as well in Istanbul a few months ago when we had the Baraka Forum discussion on the prospects of Islamic finance in solving exactly what you mentioned, our esteemed moderator, areas related to climate action and development finance. Great introductory remarks to this session. Before getting into climate action, the issues related to discrepancy and what we should be expecting, and definitely the esteemed panelists will dwell more and deeper on various aspects to it. But the members of the 57 countries of OIC constitute today around 1.9 billion people, say roughly 2 billion. And this is around 24% of the global population. But our contribution to the global economy is around $9.2 trillion, which is around 8%. So any kind of understanding before getting into finance, the fair share then of the population, and talking about the people, if they have adequate opportunities and investments in their human capital and productivity of the members of the OIC, shouldn't be 8%, it should be 24% of the GDP. So this means that we need really to multiply whatever we are doing today by at least 3 times in order to have this fair share. We can talk about Islamic finance is good, the growth is there, and the potential is there, but the gap is huge at the same time. You mentioned what we should be expecting in few weeks. And the gaps here when it comes to climate action, as you rightly mentioned, based on the estimates from Baku, around the $1.3 trillion. But we shouldn't really be forgetting that globally, we have $4 trillion of gap. If we are focusing on the gap within the OIC countries, is more than $1 trillion. Then the puzzling issue, we have the funding, we have the opportunities to support the system by more funding from conventional finance, but specifically as well from Islamic finance. Why then the gap is not being bridged? And I think here we need really to consider what we require to do. Yes, as mentioned by Mr. Najmuddin Erdogan, it's very much complicated world that we're in. There are a great deal of tensions, and there is as well this kind of the tough geopolitics. I think there are a great deal of lessons that we can really get because we can do better with finance if we're putting finance in a context. And the context here should be linking finance to the political economy within that system. And we need to link finance to the economy and how it is growing. So we can't really go and complain forever about the tensions in the global system between the emerging powers, the middle powers, and the incumbent powers. But I see solutions, and the solutions could be coming very much of what Malaysia, our host country, and I'm missed to be with you today in this gathering, that what we see more of sub-regional kind of arrangements, or we can call it regional arrangements if we're talking about the ASEAN. But the ASEAN, there are many members, including Malaysia and Indonesia, very active within this group. I read with great interest and giving as well me hope what the Prime Minister of Malaysia emphasized about this pragmatic, flexible approach of the ASEAN countries, focusing on opportunities for trade, investment, and enhancing cooperation when it comes to education and training and the flows of funds. And here, it is not just about economic cooperation through this pragmatic approach, but even when tensions are happening, as we have seen between the borders of some of the ASEAN countries, who stepped in? It's the ASEAN leadership of care, of peace, prosperity, and stability. So here you can really see this kind of interesting dynamics. We cannot really talk about silos or about isolated islands, but we need really to put finance within the context of political economy, that better economic cooperation can really provide solutions. When managing director of the IMF, and starting tomorrow, there will be the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, was addressing the issues of concern to countries, including countries of the GCC. And they are important, of course, on the OIC because we see the majority of Islamic finance is very much concentrated there. Actually, between the GCC countries and add to them Malaysia, it's around 82% of Islamic finance are within these countries. And if you add Turkey, it will be around 85%. But I'm here taking the matter from a different perspective. What she said, Madame Kristalina Georgieva, you said, well, in this kind of tense world around us, you need to diversify your economies. So here, issues related to sustainability and climate action need to be in the center of activities. What we are doing better in areas related to diversifying away from the reliance on some particular commodities, including fossil fuel. Then she said there is another D, which is digitalization. And talking here about digitalization, this means the opportunities of AI, the opportunities that could come from being smarter when it comes to investments in the human capital in relation to the new technological advances and the smart infrastructure. This is the second D. And the third D that she mentioned about deregulation, that we need, yes, we have institutional investors, yes, we have sovereign wealth funds, but we need to be careful as well about leveling the playing field. It's good that the introductory remarks talked about infrastructure projects, the mega project, but they talked as well about financial inclusion. So we need really to have here this kind of inclusive approach to development. But as I told the managing director of the IMF, that there are two more important Ds that he didn't really mention. One of them, which is basic about the people, the demographics, and one beautiful aspect of the membership of the OIC, that basically the demographics and their growth and the fact that we are youthful kind of nations and people that can really give us better opportunities if we are investing better in the human capital through health, education, and training. And the final B is basically about the data systems. And all of what we're talking about, including these numbers, data is the new oil for the new industrial revolution that we're in. Get these together, get the finance that we are mobilizing within the system, talk more about regional solutions and more of localization. When you have these kind of global tensions, there are these dynamics that the world is getting more regionalized, and OIC is constituted of different regions and sub-regions that they need to get their act together. And then we have this kind of localized solutions that we need really to tailor what we have of finance, technological means, and other means of implementation to deal with the communities, not just to grow and then dream of a spillover and some sort of cascading and some sort of trickle-down effects, but we need really to mobilize these kind of funding bottom-up rather than this kind of cascaded approach. So back to your question, yes, I'll be very much optimistic of the outcomes of BILM if they put climate action within sustainability at large. We cannot really talk about climate action in isolation from sustainable development. Get all of these investments together with a bottom-up approach, and we are not really just talking about the investment in nature, investment in climate, but investment in people. And this one can get me more optimistic about the outcomes of BILM, because President Lula and his team have been working hard to get all of these issues together, from nature to development to matters related to climate action all together.
Dr. Mohd, you just give us a very overarching and deep view and perspective of the topic today. Prof, I'm not forgetting you, but we are the Tuan Rumah, so I'm going to allow Dr. Sami Suwailem to get into the topic first. I have a question for you, but I just wanted your view on what was given by Dr. Mohd, because good and noble, but you have to deal with the reality on ground. And the reality on ground, there's a lot of gaps. So can we really straight away center people and planet towards anything we want to do from now on to the future, especially regarding the billions of trillions of investment?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. And I'm grateful to the organizers of the Global Islamic Finance Forum, to the keynote speeches today, and to the remarks of Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin. The topic of this panel is about how to bridge the gap between our member countries, and Dr. Mahmoud, he highlighted few strategies of how to really bring the resources that our countries are rich in, and how to synergize our resources. So maybe I will be more practical and indicate or summarize one of the flagship projects that the Islamic Development Bank Institute is working on, particularly on this area. The project is to develop or to study the feasibility of smart counter-trade platform between OIC member countries. Counter-trade is a kind of trade without money. So it's not a barter, it's a more advanced form of exchange of goods and services without using hard currencies. This is a practice that has been going on since the 50s, and it is worldwide practiced, but in a fragmented manner. There is no yet systematic way to help countries to streamline the counter-trade practices between them, particularly those who are partners when it comes to trade. The benefits of counter-trade are many, particularly when it comes to issues related to leverage and debt and financial constraint. Many of our producers, particularly small and medium enterprises, they face finance constraints, they face limit on their credit capacity and debt capacity, and they will not always find it feasible to resort to formal credit to finance the trade. Counter trade will be a supplementary and complementary strategy to help traders or to help importers and exporters be able to execute trade without necessarily resorting to formal or financial arrangement. It also helps member countries avoid crises, particularly when it comes to currency crisis, because many are affected by the currency crisis. Counter trade would help at least mitigate the impact of these currency crises on our member countries. Now, of course, there are many challenges, but as mentioned earlier, fintech could be very helpful when it comes to helping counter trade among member countries. First of all, the digital tokens could be used in order to facilitate counter trade. Blockchain technologies can be used to verify, authenticate the transactions. AI engines can be used to match buyers and sellers following the patterns among member countries, which would help predict and enhance the flow of goods and services between member countries. We will be, by the way, the top countries that have, they call it total trade integration are Turkey, Egypt, Indonesia, and Malaysia. They have the most or the highest synergy among member countries in order to be able to make trade among themselves. So we do have high opportunity. The total import of our member countries is about 2.6 trillion in 23, while within the OIC member countries, imports is only 500 billion. So you can see how much the gap between how much our total member countries are importing worldwide and how much they are importing from each other. So there is a room actually for synergizing and harmonizing our resources, our capital, our opportunities. And we are working on this, and inshallah we will be sharing the results whenever they are ready. Thank you very much.
So it's a digital enabled platform, not only sort of a sophisticated version of barter trade or offset, but also actually a new enabler that match needs and wants across the OIC countries first before they even look outside. It will be made that simple.
Yes, but we start with regions, even within the OIC member countries. We have 57 member countries from across the globe. So to be practical, we start with regions that are most promising, that they could be able to develop counter trade in a successful and gradual manner. And then step by step, we move forward to include other member countries.
How do you mainstream this? Because like we have heard from last night, no point for Islamic finance and trade investment to just be an alternative, but it should be because it's good for the Ummah and humanity. So how do you mainstream? Is this one of the ways to move forward?
Actually, counter trade is mainstream. It is not invented in Islamic countries or in Islamic finance.
But as the first enabler of choice for trade and investment for OIC members, do you see that being picked up?
It's difficult now to predict what would be. It would be a complementary choice option for our exporters and importers.
Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Azmi, you've been an educator, you've been outside the country looking back and looking around the world. And I just would like you to define to us your experience of advocating for Islamic finance and trade over more than 4 decades, and even, training the human resource to equip it. In maybe 2 minutes, if you can, where are we in Islamic finance and trade as compared to where we were and vis-a-vis the OIC countries for the world?
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning. Again, thank you, GIFF or GIFF for inviting me to be one of the panel members here. See, I mean, if you trace the development of Islamic finance, the modern commercial one started in 75, Dubai Islamic Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Malaysia 83. Malaysia started in 1983, Bangladesh Islamic Bank 1983. And if you compare where Malaysia is today vis-a-vis Bangladesh, we are far ahead. So if you look in this particular context, why is Malaysia successful versus some other countries? Pakistan, for that matter, in the 80s, when the late General Zia-ul Haq declared that we should be 100% Islamic, but that experiment failed. Now they started again and they keep on changing the timeline to convert everything to Islamic bank. So what makes Malaysia tick, if you ask me? I think I would say is that Malaysia is very pragmatic. The approach is gradual, but taking into account the level playing field. Because at the end of the day, if we want to mainstream Islamic finance, it must be level playing field. Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin mentioned earlier on, without a level playing field, Islamic finance cannot operate fully in a particular country. So that's why you see that in Malaysia, Malaysia has a very robust regulatory framework. Not only in the context of banking, but we have takaful, we have capital market, we have, the Bank Negara, we have Securities Commission, we even have the offshore center, the Labuan, FSA, we have Bursa Malaysia, and many others, So one perspective is a very comprehensive level playing field regulatory framework. That's one component. The other component is once you have that level playing field regulatory framework, then you need to fill in that component. Immediately, if you look at what Bank Negara has been doing over the years is talent development. You need to have qualified talent to manage Islamic financial institutions. The establishment of like INCEIF, IIBIM, Islamic Institute, and many others, essentially to have that talent development. In our work as a university, and we have been working not only in Malaysia, but also in many other countries, particularly with Islamic Development Bank, to help the IDB member countries. And by the way, to be a member of IDB member countries, you must be OIC member countries. That's one of the preconditions. So 57. So the way we work is that we tell countries that you need to have all these ingredients to be successful. So it's not that you do today and then you are successful. The robust regulatory framework and comprehensive. Many other countries, they started with banking and subsequently they want to jump into capital market, suku, without going into banking. You need to have banking as well. You need to have takaful to support that. And you need to have capital market. So you need to have specific regulation for that. And bear in mind, most of the OIC countries is a dual system, which means that you have the conventional system with the Islamic financial system. So you need to have regulators who understand this. So we cannot be thinking about producing only market players without thinking about regulators. So we need to train regulators. And this is one of the things that we do with IDB to help train regulators. But one important aspect also is when you have court cases, you need to have judges who know about Islamic finance. Yep. So you cannot have judges who are trained in civil law or, in common law, not understanding Islamic finance. So you need to train judges as well. But those are what we call the supply side. Bear in mind, if there is no demand, nobody wants Islamic finance. In many countries, when they started Islamic finance, you see the growth rate is very small. I mean, I don't want to mention specific countries, but we do know that a number of countries, for the last 10, 15 years, the percentage is only 5-6%. So what makes Malaysia tick is the whole ecosystem, the government support. And I mentioned in many platforms, many forums, when a law is brought to a parliament in Malaysia, both the government parties, the opposition parties, fully support that. In some other countries, the opposition will use that as a weapon. This is Islamization, this is terrorism. So you don't get that. So we have a strong support from the government. We have strong support from the regulators. We have strong support from the public. So you look at both supply and demand side.
Prof, so if we were to build bridges, just repeat what Malaysia has done as a country to the OIC ecosystem, harmonize a level playing field, policies, rules, regulation, supervision, build capacity across all, not just GCC, Malaysia, Indonesia, but also the other countries of OIC.
Yes.
Is it that simple?
Yes. No, it takes a lot of effort.
I'm easy for a country, but multiple countries together. How do we move this?
No, I give an example. Right even today, we have with IDB office, depending, some call it IDB. I work in IDB, we call it IDB. The new term called ISDB. I always got confused sometimes to call ISDB or IDB. But what we do together with Islamic Development Bank is that we work with them to bring countries to come to Malaysia, to learn about how Malaysia is doing it to be successful.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in IDB, back then, just after the Libyan revolution, there was a delegation from Libyan new government that came to IDB. Met the president. I was part of the C-suite, so we met. And there was the Mufti of Libya then came also, and he said that tomorrow we're going to declare 100% Islamic. We want all our banks to be Islamic bank tomorrow. And we advise them, don't do that. I mean, people are not prepared. You don't have talent and you don't have other things. The failure of the bank will be the failure of Islam.
Yes.
So what we mean is that, yes, you need to do that, but gradually you prepare. So this is the kind of thing that we work with IDB, bring people to train them to understand, meet with Bank Negara, meet with Securities Commission, meet with the market players to understand better. That's the kind of thing we are telling people.
Dr. Mahmoud Mohildin, you still with us?
Yes.
Can you give a quick remark to that? Because even to get together to save the burning planet is very chaotic at any COP meeting, whether it's in front or behind negotiations. And we now have big, strong, powerful nations and leaders saying they don't even believe in climate change anymore. How do we harmonize across OIC countries what Professor Dato Doctor has said just now? What do you think is the fastest way to achieve this? Because the people can't wait and the planet can't wait.
Right. Thank you so much. But with your permission, our excellent moderator, with the excellent points made by Dr. Azmi and by Dr. Suwailem, can I just say something about this issue of bridging the gaps and building on some of the good examples they mentioned? And I'll go very quickly to your important point about this issue of confusion and whether we are going to be achieving our climate targets or not. We have great examples around us and we need to build on them of what Dr. Azmi mentioned, and we're talking through Malaysia today. I remember very well the good wisdom of the former governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, Dr. Zeti, when she was promoting Islamic finance, not just on the values, which are great, and the principles of fairness, which are important, but the quality of service, the competition of the service, the lower transaction cost of the service, that would allow even those who are not believing on those values, they go for it because it's high quality. And then I would say on building bridges to the excellent point of Dr. Suwailem about issue of trade. 20 years ago, we're more likely than not, if we are commuting between our different capitals of the OIC countries, or perhaps even in our region in the Middle East, will go through Europe or other destinations. But now you are more likely than not, you are going to be taking one of the flights via Istanbul or via Dubai or via Qatar. Why? Because they are offering high quality of service with lower transaction costs with the international standards. This means that when we are trying to say integrate, we are not compromising on the high quality of safety, of lowering the transaction cost, and at the same time, you are doing great trade in services. The same can go in areas related to goods and areas related to investment. So basically, we have great examples on quality and competition that we need to take further with us. Then what can get me more optimistic, even with all of these kind of interesting political statements, I would say three things. First, and I encourage you to have a quick look to one of the best articles that came out from the Financial Times about sustainability, because technology is giving us hope. Even for the countries that are rich in fossil fuel, including Malaysia, including the Gulf countries, they see the opportunities today of diversifying into renewables, because technology is getting us to produce electricity with lower costs than 10 years ago, than 15 years ago. And now it's a fraction of that production if you are getting it through solar or wind, or getting it through some sort of blended solutions. So even if people are fixated with some old modalities of producing electricity, now it makes sense because of the technology and the cost effectiveness. It is not a new ideology. It's basically because of concern about sustainability, but coupled through the push through technology. Three things need to be mobilized together: technology and investment in R&D. The second is basically mobilization of finance at scale. And the third is behavioral change that can really get us more aligned with all of these kind of technologies. But can I just, because of the issues related to Islamic finance, and I'll be very quick about it, based on what Dr. Suwailem mentioned and the good wisdom of Dr. Azmi. When we are doing all of these projects, we are building the pipeline. And unfortunately, a great number of OIC countries are suffering from the debt crisis that they are spending today in debt service more than what they are spending on sustainability, on education and health. So before getting into a crisis and try to solve it, can we please make sure that there is more private equity participation through better public-private partnerships, through investments in long-term finance, through concessional means? We cannot really go and solve a problem of climate by having a problem or a crisis in debt. And the solution that are with us today, that we can really have the good pipeline of investable, I'm not just saying bankable, they are investable projects that could really prevent us from getting deeper into such crisis.
Dr. Sami, so quickly on that, the rate is very low for OIC's intellectual property and R&D, let alone commercialization of those. But a lot of money seems to flow maybe easier to Wall Street and Silicon Valley. But how do we ensure, because if the value for investment, we have the new technology that will solve the world's ill. So how do we cultivate this together? Because again and again, if we don't hold the IP in this modern world, then we'll forever be following other people's technology.
Thank you for bringing this very important point. Our member countries have the highest percentage of youth. Youth are the most likely to produce new ideas, and they are the most likely to adopt new products and new technologies. So they are the critical factor for supply and demand, for innovation, and therefore for wealth creation. It is unfortunate that our youth are facing so many challenges, and I would take this opportunity here to encourage all our member countries and our institutions to encourage entrepreneurship, encourage innovation hubs, and encourage intellectual property to the extent that this would result in wealth creation.
On that, because the young people, they're not really bound by boundaries, whether it's national borders or even geography. So instead of looking at young people by countries, you're going to have digital platform anywhere. So can we have a multi-country young people coming together to solve the ills of the world? Not based on nationality, but based on the problem and solution technology.
Of course, this can be done. But let me mention an initiative that the Islamic Development Bank Institute also took in this particular regard. We teamed up with Mohammed bin Salman Business School for Entrepreneurship, which is endorsed by Babson College in the US. Babson College is #1 in entrepreneurship. We developed together an executive program on entrepreneurship for it's a global program. It's an open program.
Okay.
Part of it digital, part of it in person, and it's fully funded by the Islamic Development Bank. Of course, 1.9 billion population, we will not be able to cover this, not even in 100 years. But even if we are able to nurture 57 Steve Jobs in our member countries,
Yes.
one in each member country, that would be equivalent to, in 20 years, creating 57 Apples in our member country. That would make a very big difference.
Okay. Prof, on paper it looks good, but I remember the early days of UIA, where the best and brightest from a lot of Islamic countries came here to KL, even in PJ, not even in Gombak. And that solidarity pervades until when they are leaders in their own country, and that smooth trade, investment, and everything else. But looking at the current challenges now, if we look at it, how do we ensure that the young people, instead of being angry and going down the street as a solution, are really given the opportunity to tap into the number of trillions and billions we say? Because if they are the young people of the OIC countries, many of them are from the B40 or M40 that do not have the collateral, like in the special address. If you're not having a collateral, you don't fit into our banking system. I'm not going to give you finance or loan. So innovation in terms of investment and financing for the young, don't you think that there should be more focus and integration across the power of OIC on that?
Thank you very much. I mean, before I answer into that question, I think we have to go back to understand the demographics of the OIC. And like Mahmoud Mahyudin mentioned, and also Mr. Najmuddin Bilal Dogan mentioned, I mean, OIC population, if you look in terms of the profile, majority are young. I mean, if you take from 15 to 64, I think about more than 34% young population. So we will have what we call the population dividend growth rate. And people are savvy. But on the other hand, if you take, say, for example, the Findex report, you will see that the percentage of individuals in OIC countries having a banking account or an account in the digital wallet and so on is very low. In some countries, it's less than 50%. Malaysia is more than 90%. So we cannot just use one brush to paint the whole OIC countries and say this is the solution. The solution is very much, maybe one way would be to group countries according to their level. Okay, so that's one point. If you look in the particular context of youth, okay, we see that the digital platform is one of the ways to address and get more the youth into the sector. And whether we like it or not, COVID has helped to accelerate the digitalization. Okay. So you see countries like Indonesia, very high penetration rate of internet and so on. Yes. So to me, the platform to get more youth, be it in the context of business, in the context of financial sector, investment, savings, even sukuk for that matter, would be through digital means. And I'm glad in the recent budget 2026 announcement by government, we're talking about having a digitized, tokenized sukuk. So this is one way we create sukuk in small components, small amount through token, and it can be purchased by individual. And it can start in Malaysia, and then you can roll out to other countries. Again, platform is boundaryless.
Right.
You can go anywhere.
Yes.
So using different currencies.
We're going towards the last quarter, and I'm going to have to take views from you guys to be inclusive. I know it's going to be on the screen later, but before that, towards the last part, sometimes in this increasingly chaotic world that we live in, perception is more important than reality. And has been proven by the fact that the genocide could continue to go on and on for more than a year. More than 300 of my counterparts who are journalists, even from the West, has been killed, and yet it continues. It points to me and my community who does news that if you don't control or influence the main mode of communication, then your reality doesn't matter to other people perceived reality. And why do people go on the street? Because they think that they are at the edge and in danger, and they don't have any other outlet. So to build bridges, information, knowledge, literacy, and awareness must be one of the key pursuit and focus of the OIC countries, members and initiative. Dr. Mohd, because you have the luxury of thinking about all these years ahead than us, looking at the Millennial Development Goals and then SDGs and also the COP fight. How do you think, especially in the ecosystem of the Ummah and OIC countries, to help facilitate investment and trade, what about the literacy and awareness? Because otherwise, I might be a startup from a Muslim country called Malaysia, but I want to list under SPAC vehicle in New York Stock Exchange, rather than looking at the power of the Islamic finance. Over to you, Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin.
Right. I think in this world, and you are very much right, this kind of dominance by perception needs really to be always challenged if the perception is very different from the reality, by better information, by challenging that through means of communication. I was talking to a couple of colleagues here when we are being pushed from producing these lengthy reports to op-eds of around 700 words. And now they are telling us even those 700 words are too long. So we need really to summarize them in catchy titles to capture the information and use every means, including what we know by tweeting, by TikToks and all of that. But having said this, there are two things. First, the issue about the communities and how can we do that better within our own community that know each other's better. This is one area. The second thing, that even if you have the new information, and I can give you something relevant to our discussion today, because finance is very much the most important area that controls this kind of success or failure. Yes, technology is important, but technology needs funding. We talked about behavioral change, but in order to do it, you need to promote it through an institution that needs funding. And then one of the most complicated areas is basically about the cost of capital facing many of our countries. Surprise, surprise. One of the most important reports that came out from the MDBs, the multilateral development banks, is telling us that the default of our countries of the global south, including the OIC countries, the perception is very much challenged by the actual data. So in real figures, that the default rates have been very much lower than the perceived rates. And this report had been around for 2 years. It's called the GEM report, which is the Global Emerging Markets Database. It's telling us that defaults of African countries, of Asian countries, of member of the OIC is much less than what's perceived, and we are deserving much better treatment from the capital market. Did anything change? No, because we were not really careful and were not really active in promoting such important piece of information. Just imagine that the report that came out 2 years ago is telling us, well, your perception is much better than the reality, that the reality is worse than the perception. What would happen? The market would be treated differently. So what I'm saying here, first, try to challenge the perception, get the data right, try to be more attractive in sharing such information around. And then when we talked about regionalization, we're talking about localization. Neighborhoods know better about their inhabitants more than the global market. So I would say here that these kind of solutions, when we are tailoring them, when we are trying to do better at a regional level and a local level, many of the problems related to perception could be challenged even in this kind of sensitive area related to information related to credit or finance or cost of capital.
It is an inconvenient truth. Indeed, Dr. Suwailem, your views on literacy and awareness, taking into consideration that many of the OIC countries' population are young, and they have a very different way of assessing information or even sharing it. So how do we increase literacy and awareness? Because we know, not unique to these parts of the world, the scammers are better at doing that than many good forces and institutions.
I think our youth are aware of many of the details. We should not underestimate the intelligence of our youth. Social media, of course, there are so many distortions in the social media, but there are many also sources of facts on the social media. It's very difficult to give a general, in my opinion. Yes, at the institutional level, yes. But at the youth level, I don't think there is a gap. But since you mentioned from billions to trillions, there is a well-established principle in science and in social sciences. It's called Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. 80% of the results come out of 20% of the cause. If the impact that we want to create is trillions, it doesn't mean we need trillions.
Okay.
So back to the innovation, venture capital, although venture capital historically has been a small size of total investment, long-term investment in the US, for example, the value it created is multiple times the value that was created by other forms of financing and investment. All kinds of investment and financing are important in terms of, in principle, but when it comes to seed capital, when it comes to venture capital, when it comes to equity capital, this is the engine for growth. And when all speakers emphasize risk sharing, we should always remember it starts with equity. It starts with venture capital. It starts with the startups. That's where wealth creation should start. But that doesn't mean we should channel trillions. That sector, that segment is small, doesn't require billions. It requires smaller amount of capital, but it requires, as the esteemed speakers highlighted, institutional ecosystem that would support the youngsters. That in many of our countries, there are very good educational systems.
Yep.
And yet, the youth graduate and then go on to the West.
Okay.
Europe or the United States. And they get very good jobs based on their education in their member countries.
Okay.
So there is nothing wrong in our member country when it comes to education. In many cases, we have very good education system. So where's the problem? In the job market. And how to create jobs? Not by debt financing, by equity and partnership and risk capital. That's where we can start, and that's where we can create jobs.
Prof, help me here. Okay, we're looking at the young, but sometimes there's a lot of top-down in the ecosystem of OIC countries. And we were talking before we went on stage. I was sharing with you how Turkey, they put together 13,000 Turkish minds, and they came out with the COVID vaccine in 11 months, of which President Erdogan was first recipient. Second recipient was the mind behind it, the president of the Science Council of Tubita at that time, Dr. Hassan Mandal. So it can be done. But we, on this side of the world, were searching for vaccines because we don't have the local capacity. We have more than 2,000 kilometer borders between Malaysia and Thailand, which is just jungle, not a single phone reception. Again, Turkey have two of the best drone IPs and production line, Bayraktar, for example. So, and ironically for us in the media, when we look at the Ukraine conflict with Russia, from a drone perspective, it's basically a Muslim war because Russia used the drone from Iran, Shahid, and Ukraine used a lot of drone from Turkey. So, but procurement-wise, when we look at solution across OIC countries, we don't see this counter trading that is going to be done and things being offset like that, for example. So both from an institutional perspective down to the people as the consumer level of the young on literacy and awareness and perception reality, Prof.
If you're asking somebody coming from a university, of course I can go on and on talking about awareness, literacy. But to me, three important things: awareness, understanding, and implementation. In many countries, even as advanced as Singapore, scams, billions of ringgit happening because awareness is not there, or they may have been aware, but again, understanding and implementation. So the key thing is essentially to get people to really implement after they understand. That's the key thing. So in the context of OIC countries, what we need, of course, to do is, one is to create the awareness. Second is understanding in terms of, for example, in Islamic finance as a tool to support the intra-OIC countries, and then the implementation part. How do we go about implementing? That could be through platform, through trade settlement, through banking. So these are some of the platforms. But the key thing is to provide the right talent who not only are aware, who understands, and who implement. I'm mindful of the time.
Yeah.
So one important point is that OIC countries need to leverage each other in the context of building talent. I think that's the key thing. If you want to promote Islamic finance, if you want to promote halal industry, or even for that matter, Malaysia is very strong in ITECAD, utilizing the Islamic social finance. These are important things that needs to be shown to the OIC countries, how we go about implementing it.
Got it. Do I have any questions? Because I don't see them on screen in front of me. The MC, we don't have. Our audience are shy. If you raise your hand now, I'll bring my mic to you. That's how inclusive I am. Yes, brother, I'll go down to you. Come. Which is the nearest way to you? Or do we have the mic down there? Or you can come to me closer. Islamic solidarity, come on. Across boundaries and spaces. Please introduce yourself and just be succinct with your idea or question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdullah. I'm a student of INCEIF. So thank you very much for very insightful and very important ideas shared here. Just wanted to ask a humble question. Okay. So, targets are set based on plan, and plans allow to calculate approximate time of achievement of those targets. So is there any target, plan, and estimated time to achieve 100% Islamic finance in Malaysia?
Prof, you got that? Tan Sri, come on. Before you go, one for the road. Yes. Any question or comment from you?
Kamarul has been doing this to me for many years.
Yes, I'm consistent.
No, I think it's been a great session. My brother, Dr. Mahmoud, it's been some years. And I think very timely. The topic is good, building bridges. I thought the keynote this morning by Mr. Bilal Erdogan and following from Tuanku's royal address. The building blocks are all there, as you also articulated, Kamarul. Our joint challenge is how to connect them and build on that. Okay. On that note, inshallah, this session is a great beginning to the sessions that follow. Inshallah. Yeah?
So you're saying there's real things on ground happening?
Well, there's parts of it. I think Bilal referred to a conversation we had. So a dream is to say there are many building blocks. Some are really shining,
Okay.
so we can call them stars.
Okay.
But part of the great order and, pattern is actually, can we arrange those stars to become a constellation? I think this is why we gathered today.
And beat Starling at it. Okay, got it, Tan Sri.
Oh, Starling, you tambah lah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry to trouble you. Prof, you want to take your student's question? You didn't plan him, did you? No. Okay.
I'm not sure whether I should answer or somebody on the front row. But anyway, I mean, if you look at the percentage now, Malaysia is 50%. It's about 50%. And what I like, and I tell in many countries as I advise countries, is that, and Tan Sri Wahid is here, implementing Islamic first. I think that's the thing.
Okay.
What is unique about Malaysia is that when you go to a bank, the bank by default will give you an Islamic account, unless you say, oh, no, I don't want Islamic account.
Okay.
So that's the default.
By default, okay.
Yes, and of course, it is it's a journey, and you see the big development. I mean, our neighboring country, for example, which have about more than 90% population, you look at the Islamic finance asset, it's still very small.
Yes.
So it would, to me, the approach, it should be gradual but systematic.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
MC, in the name of brotherhood, please do not give me a red card. I'm aware about the time. But because Dr. Sami said you start small, don't have to start with trillion. We start with one brother now. There's a lot of questions on screen. I'm just going to pick two in the interest of time. First from Emily Faisal bin Jano, because I always give advantage to those who identify in the name of transparency. His question is, the challenges will be on the Sharia compliance with different beliefs in mazhab by regions. How do we cater or cut across this common understanding, bridges across the different mazhabs? Dr. Suwailem, you want to take that?
I think we have Sharia scholars here. Where is Akram Laluddin and Dr. Yunus? Anyhow, I think the problem is, by the way, interestingly, the diversity of the views of scholars when it comes to financial or economic transactions are much, much less than their differences in other areas. Not only the different schools have more consistent views when it comes to economic activities, but even in other faiths like Judaism and Christianity, they all share the same universal principles: prohibition of riba, prohibition of gharar, obligation of charity, and that's enough.
So look at commonality, not at the difference.
Exactly.
Since you're on the mic, in the interest of time, what are the key multilateral institution and projects that can move the levers in scaling intra-OIC trade investments?
We are in the feasibility phase.
Okay.
So the feasibility study will assess and identify the opportunities and potential institutions that can join. So we are in that, we are working on it.
MC sedekah concept, okay? 30 seconds each to my key panelists. Dr. Mahmoud, you first, you're the furthest away. 30 seconds, if you have to do one thing, ideally, to really accelerate trade, investment, and finance among the OIC countries, what would your recommendation be?
Well, I would say here, the respect of knowledge and not to confuse the means of implementation. While they are very much important and they took the majority of our discussion today, with the ultimate objectives of what we are after, now, which have been highlighted by Maqasid al-Sharia at the end, is basically seeking the happiness of the people, their peace, their prosperity, in a livable planet that shouldn't really be compromised. So here, I think, while we are focusing on the means, and the means shouldn't really be as well compromised, that at the same time, we need to prioritize the objectives, and we should really put them as the North Star of our actions.
I said 30 seconds, but because of jet lag, I give you more. Dr. Sami Suwailem. 30 seconds, what's one thing, if you could do it, ideally, for OIC to accelerate?
Invest in the youth.
How much? Typical Malaysian question.
That's another 30 seconds.
Okay, that one is belakang. Prof?
Creating a network of talent institutions. Okay, at the end of the day, talent relates to youth also. So you need to build talent to support the development of not only Islamic finance, Islamic economy, but also increasing inter-trade between OIC countries.
Well, all my panelists are superb. Even those I picked from the state on ground are superb. If I have to take one key thing, it's about trust. And I think the building blocks are already there. We just need to do it. So I hope you will not begrudge me. I'm going to take a quote not from a Muslim person, but Islam is about ad-din, it's about the best way of life for humanity. So I'm going to take what this two-pigtail teenager from Scandinavia said when I was there at the World Comic Forum in front of all older men, gentlemen's club. She said, we need solutions and action yesterday because the world is burning today, and you're going to leave me with the ashes tomorrow. And that's Greta Thunberg, who was on the Sumut Flotilla fighting for Gaza. So we are all one human and one planet on this. Thank you so much to GIFF and all of you today.
Thank you to our panelists and moderator for such intriguing discussion. I'm feeling so generous, but may I please invite all of the gentlemen to step forward for a group photo.
I appreciate that you are trying to be inclusive, even with those who are very much far away from you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause to our moderator and panelists.